This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should, too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Here we go.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Very happy to have you here, my friend. A review of Norwegian Cruise Line's Norwegian Dawn this week. And as always, staff writer Richard Sims on deck with cruise news. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug.
Kicking things off with a reminder that if it seems too good to be true, it most likely is.
That is 100% true, Doug. And I'm just going to give you a little preview here. We're going to circle back around by the end of this show to prove this true. But right now, in this case, we're talking about people who went on the Carnival Cruise Line website and booked cruises that were incredibly cheap, like super cheap. Soon after, those people who had booked those cruises received word from Carnival that, well, those rates were accidents resulting from some IT issues, and shocker, Carnival will not be honoring them. Those reservations were canceled, obviously. Now, I'm going to give Carnival credit here for doing something they definitely did not have to do. They actually gave each person who confirmed and booked one of those accidental rates a $100 future cruise credit that they could use on any booked sailing between now and the end of August. That said, a lot of people thought Carnival should eat the cost and honor the reservations. They're like, hey, they made the mistake. You shouldn't, be penalized for that. Of course, the cruise contract that all of us automatically sign when booking a cruise, the one that I'm pretty willing to bet pretty much no one listening right now has actually ever read every word of. But it says very specifically that in the event of a pricing mistake, they can cancel. Those contracts cover pretty much every contingency under the sun. Personally, I kind of think that they would have gotten a ton of good publicity by standing by those reservations. Of course, we don't know how many folks booked, so we don't know how much that would involve them eating. But given the record profits they have right now, I mean, they would have gotten so much good publicity out of, yeah, sure, they could have just canceled this because the cruise contract gives them permission to, but instead they went ahead and they are honoring, these people who got the cruise rates for this incredibly, ridiculously cheap amount of money. So I think it would have been worth it.
In other Carnival news that isn't a good look, 2 women were charged with assault after a little dust up at the guest services desk.
This, as they say, is why we can't have nice things. So here's what went down. Apparently, the 2 women, Tanya and Lisa, they were not traveling together. They did not know each other. They were both on the Carnival Spirit. This was back in March. The cruise was coming to an end, and as many people do, they were both in line at guest services. But let me add a crucial detail. They were standing in the special guest services line that's meant only for diamond and platinum guests. Tanya, I don't know how, but apparently figured out that Lisa hadn't risen to that elite status and pointed out that she shouldn't be in that particular line. From there, things escalated to what I call a soap opera doubleheader. See, on soaps, people often slap one another. It's like, it happens all the time. But every now and then you get a scene where someone slaps their rival who then turn around and slaps them back. And apparently that's basically what happened here. That we got a full-on slap fest that eventually turned into even more physicality with kicking, maybe some punching. Because it happened while the ship was in the international waters, the FBI was notified. Both women were charged with assault. They were due in court today, actually, as we are recording this. So if we get word down the line on how things played out in court, we will definitely let people know.
Meanwhile, we have an update on a ship which experienced that hantavirus outbreak.
Yeah, as we've said for weeks now, this is a rapidly developing and constantly changing story. So there's every chance that, even if you listen to this 10 minutes after we record it, the information might change. But here's the latest. Passengers who were aboard the stricken MV Hondius are now being transported back to their home countries, but they're still being monitored. As of Wednesday afternoon, a Parisian woman who was the 11th person confirmed to have contracted the virus was in critical condition. It's reported that she did not have symptoms when she left the ship, which is one of the reasons health organizations around the world are monitoring the patients and will be for some time. The disease can have an incubation period as long as 6 weeks. So, many health officials are suggesting patients should be kept in quarantine for that period. 18 Americans who are on board the ship are currently quarantined, with none having, again, as of this recording, tested positive for hantavirus. The World Health Organization says it's likely more of the ship's passengers will fall ill, but insists that a full-on widespread outbreak is incredibly unlikely.
And while we're on the subject, we'll talk about those 2 norovirus outbreaks that also took place over the past few days.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. But before we do, let's just take a moment to draw a very clear, very distinct line in the sand between norovirus and hantavirus. They aren't the same, not even close to being the same. They're not similar. But I think some people are sort of connecting the two in their heads because, frankly, because of some of the media coverage. Almost every story which mentions these norovirus cases also references hantavirus and what's going on with that. And so it kind of comes off as if they're the same thing. We've actually gotten a lot of questions from people asking if they're related. They are not at all. But okay, so having established that, let's talk about the 2 cases that just came in the news this last few days. One is on the Caribbean Princess, where about 100 people between passengers and crew have contracted norovirus. The ship was actually not allowed to dock in Nassau out of an abundance of caution. And we've seen ships be allowed to dock in Nassau with norovirus before, but here's the difference. The ship was going to be arriving very close to the Bahamian elections. We've talked in the last few weeks about how they don't serve liquor on the election day itself. But they also didn't want to take a risk of people bringing norovirus in and getting a lot of people sick, so they wouldn't be able to vote. The other case of norovirus in the news right now involves the Ambassador Ambition. That ship has about 50 people on board who have norovirus. And that led to the French port of Bordeaux confining the 1,700 passengers and crew to the ship. It has undergone enhanced cleaning, and they've got medical personnel coming on board. Passengers were told that once the local authorities give the all clear, they'd be able to disembark. But for right now, as we record this, I believe they are still on that ship.
And a sad story at Carnival's Celebration Caye.
Yeah, details are a little unclear as to exactly how it happened, but a female guest who was a passenger aboard the Carnival Celebration was using a mobility scooter to make her way down the Celebration Caye pier when she wound up driving her scooter off the pier and into the water. Carnival's team was able to pull her from the water, but their efforts to resuscitate her failed and she passed away. There's no official word on exactly how it happened, but a fellow guest told one of the local news stations that the woman appeared to have some sort of medical emergency before plunging off the pier. I don't know what exactly she means by that. Maybe perhaps she saw her, sort of having some kind of what do you call it? Almost like a palsy where it causes you to shake. We don't know, but this is what someone has reported. The deceased guest's body was taken by the Royal Bahamas Police and the coroner's department, where it was expected that an autopsy would be conducted, and that might perhaps give a better clue as to how the woman rode her scooter right off the end of the pier.
And wrapping things up, we have a short cruise that was made even shorter when guests were basically told, you have to get off the ship.
Oh my God, this is such an awful story. Can you imagine? Talk about a bummer of a vacation. So guests boarded the Disney Adventure in Singapore, and they were looking forward to what was supposed to be a 4-day sailing. But that night, the ship remained at the dock. And when they woke up the next morning, everyone had to disembark because the cruise had been canceled. Now, Disney did everything in its power to make up to these obviously disappointed guests. They gave them a full refund. They gave them a 50% future cruise credit. They helped them with, costs associated with changing their flights and finding a hotel to stay in and all that. it was not particularly fun for the passengers, obviously, but folks on the internet had kind of a good time talking about how Disney had basically bought a lemon. Because you'll remember, the Disney Adventure was originally being built for Dream Cruises out of Hong Kong. When that company, when Genting went bankrupt, Disney was able to come in and get the ship, which was about 75% complete at the time, for what was considered a real bargain. I think they paid around $40 million for it, which sounds like a lot, but in cruise ship terms, for a ship that size, that is a major bargain. And as I promised at the top of the hour, that sort of brings us right back to where we started, reminding people, including ship owners, that if something seems too good to be true, whether it's the price of a cruise or the price of a cruise ship, it probably is.
Gosh, that story, though, I'm just thinking about the family that emailed our tip line from Manhattan. So they flew over there. Now, I know they didn't fly just for a 4-night cruise because Singapore is a long way to go just for a 4-night cruise. They probably had other parks and stuff, whether it be Universal or hopping to Disney somewhere else as part of this vacation. But imagine like having your vacation centered around this, going 9,000 miles and having this dropped on you.
Dude, I would be annoyed if I flew to Florida and they suddenly said, hey, you got to spend the night on the ship. Now get off. I mean, so I can't even imagine flying all the way to Hong Kong, getting on board and having that happen. Now it's worth mentioning that the next sailing, they did obviously fix it because the next sailing did go just exactly as it was supposed to. So, fortunately, it was only that one group of people. But if you are among that one group of people, pretty sure you're not going to use the word fortunately to describe your experience.
And also it had to get away from the dock because there was a Dream Cruises ship that had to get into that space because that certain position there at the pier there in Singapore is only for larger ships. The other one does smaller ships like the Holland Americas and stuff. So, yeah.
Is that why they weren't allowed basically to, when I heard this story, I thought, why not just let them stay on board for the 4 days while you're fixing it?
Yeah, so the ship had to go, so that it involved like tugboats pulling it away from the dock and all that while they were fixing it. And then it had to go do some sea trials in the bay there to do some circles to make sure things were still working.
So I guess from a safety point of view, you're like, okay, there might be something wrong with the ship. We're not going to leave you on it while we do this experiment.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're trying to fix something and you're like freaking out about it, you probably don't want to have 6,700 guests on board either.
Yeah, probably. It's kind of like, having your mother-in-law over for dinner when your stove is broken.
Yeah. All right. Staff writer Richard Sims, as always, thanks, my friend.
Glad to be here.
Have a tip or a lead on a news story? Let us know. Email tips@cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com. Tony just returned from his very first solo cruise aboard Norwegian Dawn out of Tampa over to the Western Caribbean. It was a 7-night sailing. He joins us on the line to talk about his vacation. How you doing, Tony?
Good. How you doing, Doug?
Good to talk to you again. Last time we spoke, you did what? Was it Norwegian Breakaway, you said?
Getaway. To Bermuda, yeah.
You're in the Jersey area. You had to make your way down to Florida for this cruise. Give me some pre-cruise thoughts. What made you want to take this 7-nighter on Norwegian Dawn?
So it was my first experience as a solo traveler. So I was kind of exploring, different options, and I was looking for something. My kids are in college and high school, so I took a break on my own and went down. So, I was gold for Norwegian Cruise Lines of perks. So doing this was a triple up opportunity to get triple points. So it kind of put me over the threshold to platinum now. So it was a couple of reasons. They had to give a shot for a solo cruise and also get the opportunity to move up to platinum.
That's awesome with the triple points thing. Is that like just select sailings offer that, or how does that play out?
Yeah, if you do some research on their website, they always offer frequent cruiser deals on there. You can look into that. And they have a lot of current and usual like double points opportunities for certain select cruises, but then they occasionally offer like a triple up opportunity. And actually, when I originally booked it, it was double, and then they quickly came out with a triple one. And I was able to talk to my cruise consultant and rebook it under the triple opportunity.
Any pre-cruise time before you sailed Norwegian Dawn?
Yeah, I flew down the day before. I didn't really do much in Tampa other than grab dinner and stayed at a hotel. And, I stayed at a Hampton Inn right in downtown Tampa there, real close to the cruise port. So I just, they had free transportation as part of the package. So I was able to get a shuttle from the hotel right to the cruise port.
How was the embarkation on Norwegian Dawn, and how long did it take you from the curb to the ship?
Yeah, it was pretty efficient. I got there, I think my check-in time was around 10:30. I got there a little early, around 10 o'clock. So I stood outside for a couple minutes while they were kind of still getting things organized at the terminal. But by the time I got inside and checked in, it was probably half hour, 45 minutes, and I was on the ship.
So you walk onto Dawn. What was your first impressions this time around?
Yeah, same thing. You get on, you walk in, you see a little bit of the atrium, and obviously they want you to check in for the safety check, and I did that real quickly. But yeah, I was real impressed. It is one of their older ships, smaller ships. So I've been pretty much on the breakaway class for the last 7 or 8 cruises on Norwegian. So I was a little nervous about kind of going back in time to an older ship, but it was a great ship in great shape and had a great time.
Were you nervous about sailing solo, or is that have you done it before on other cruise lines, or even
I've never done it before, so I'm always traveling with my 2 kids or extended family. So yeah, this is my kind of first. I was a little nervous about it, to be honest with you, but I have to say, Norwegian does a really nice job in supporting their solos, both with pricing for the cabins as well as programs and things like that for solo travelers.
What kind of stateroom did you book for this 7-night cruise, and what did you think of it?
A standard balcony room on the 9th floor. It was great. It was obviously, I usually get a balcony or higher when I sail. So, it's definitely I'm usually traveling with my 2 teenage kids. So usually I got a lot of stuff I'm trying to fit in and things like that. But just being as a solo on a balcony cabin, I had plenty of space and relaxation time in the room.
How up to date was it?
There's no USB outlets or anything like that in the room. There's 2 US outlets in there and a couple European power outlets, but I kind of did my research in advance. So I brought, an approved protector or, multi-strip for myself so I can plug in my chargers and things like that. So yeah, definitely not up to date on the technical side in the room, but everything else was up to date and modern.
Let's talk about the food on Norwegian Dawn. We'll start at the buffet area right there off the pool. What were your impressions of it, and did it ever feel too crowded during your sailing?
Not too crowded. I'm not a big buffet person, so I don't eat frequently at the buffet. I might grab a snack or something like that. But so most of my meals I eat in the main dining room and things like that. But again, I would run in, around tea time or something like that, grab a snack. But the buffet was kind of smaller on that ship. But at the same time, it was pretty much an adult crowd given the time of the year that I traveled. I think one of the things I overheard from one of the officers was, I think only there was 18 people under the age of 18 on the cruise, and the average age was 68. So it was definitely an older crowd on the cruise. So it definitely didn't feel crazy or rushed or anything like that anywhere I was, including the buffet.
The buffet, if I'm not mistaken, on this class of ship, it has an extension on the aft of the ship outside, correct?
Yes, it does. So outside by the on the pool deck, there's a small portion of the buffet. It's mostly like burgers and things like that kind of grill kind of items. But yes, there's a small portion of the buffet that's outside.
You mentioned that you like to eat in the main dining room, so let's talk about that part of the dining experience. And traveling as a solo passenger, did you meet people before dining where you actually, or were you sat with a group of people, or were you I'd rather just sit over here by myself?
I kind of did both. In the beginning, I kind of sat by myself, which I was kind of okay with. I kind of had that in my brain before I went. But they do have solo meetups once a night. That is hosted by one of the cruise staff, and the gentleman who did that did a really good job. So we would you can go to the solo lounge, hang out there, and he always offered, listen, whoever wants to go eat together, I'll make arrangements and walk you guys down to the main dining room and have a table ready for everybody. So I did do that once or twice, and the other times I kind of did my own thing.
What did you think about the main dining room as far as the food and the service?
Both were excellent. The service was, good. All the wait staff were, pleasant and attentive to everything. Really didn't wait long for anything. Even as a solo person, if I was sitting by myself, they tried to go out of their way to say hi, or the host would come over and talk to us. So yeah, I never felt like that anything was challenging about it. They do have two main dining rooms on this ship. It's the Aqua and the Venetian are the two main dining rooms. The Venetian being a little nicer than the Aqua, but both having the same menus each day. So again, both were great dining rooms. I pretty much stuck with the smaller Aqua because it was a little more, casual, which is the mode I was in.
Did any dishes really stick out to you?
Nothing specific. I mean, I think I had steak one night. It was pretty good. It's not as good as the specialty dining, but it was fine. Like, I eat a lot of chicken dishes. I tried a Thai dish one night that was in the main dining room. I kind of like exploring from a culinary point of view, and everything I tried was amazing.
With this sailing, you mentioned that you turned platinum. So do you turn platinum on the cruise you actually are sailing, or is it not until the next sailing?
You earn your points on that sailing you're on, and then for your next sailing, your status changes.
Okay, gotcha. Did you do any specialty dining on this one?
Yeah, I did 3 different ones. Again, I was trying to stay more casual, so I went with Los Lobos, which is their Mexican dining option. Really good there. Basic, nothing crazy good, but an upscale version of Mexican versus the main dining room. I also tried La Cucina, which is their Italian restaurant. I mean, I live in New Jersey in the Philadelphia area, so I have access to really good, authentic Italian food. I would say this is like a step above, a chain Olive Garden, but at the same time, it was fine. There was nothing wrong with the food. And then I did Bamboo, which is like their, sushi / Asian fusion restaurant. Again, very good, very good options there. And again, everything was good quality.
Is Bamboo the one that is just outside of the teppanyaki?
Yeah, it's kind of like sort of, connected to it, but you don't hear all the activity of the teppanyaki place, but you definitely can kind of look through and see the teppanyaki restaurant on the other side.
How was the entertainment? Actually, before we get to the entertainment, do they call it Sheehan's or the local on this one?
Oh yeah, Oceans they call it. Yeah, I actually went there frequently, so sometimes if I wasn't up early enough to hit the main dining room for breakfast, that's where I would go for breakfast. And again, never really waited long for any of the restaurants, even when, I didn't have reservations. Most I've ever waited, even at Oceans, was like 10 minutes to get a table. You
mentioned reservations. Is the Norwegian app something that you should have by your side as you're doing your day-to-day? Like, can you see in real time, let's just say that Bamboo has a 15-minute wait. Does it show that on the app, or is that more so on digital signage around the ship?
Yeah, it's more on digital signage. And also, for the main dining rooms, it gives you a little bit of a kind of a capacity meter on there. For most of the specialty dining restaurants, I mean, most people, including myself, obviously made reservations before, whenever I could make the reservations, I made them in advance. So that was I never really paid attention to the wait for any of the specialty restaurants because I had advanced reservations for them.
Okay.
But the Norwegian app's pretty good. I mean, obviously, as a typical bells and whistles, you can look up your bill and things like that. But, all the entertainment's on there, the schedule's on there, all up to date. And, it gives you all the current information that you need.
What did you think of the entertainment on this 7-night cruise?
Yeah, it was pretty good. They had three main theater shows. They had like the Welcome Aboard show. They had a Women of Rock show that was pretty good. Again, it kind of covered all the Women of Rock and different covers of that. And then they had more of like a dance show that was pretty good as well. So all three were really good. It wasn't really Broadway shows. I know that's one of the things I'm disappointed about with Norwegian. I used to really enjoy their Broadway type of shows, but these were typical production shows on a cruise, but very good quality. The vocals were really good. The dancers were really good. The crew staff was really good on this cruise.
How about entertainment outside of the theater? Like if there was any music playing in the atrium or whatnot?
Absolutely. So they have a kind of a lounge there. It's a larger lounge where they have like a band playing, or they would have karaoke and game show things like that. And then in the atrium, there was always some sort of music going on, whether it was a piano player or a duet playing and singing. So all over the ship, you would run into these different, acts. And they also had a comedian on the ship that was pretty good as well.
In that ship, don't they have the spinnaker on that one?
They do, it's actually a nice feature. I think that's missing on the newer ships. Even the newer ships have some really nice, lounges and facilities. I think that concept of on a classic ship is pretty good because again, in the breakaway class ships, they use the atrium for a lot of stuff. A lot of game shows and things like that. Trivia are all in that atrium, so it becomes like crazy there. With that spinnaker lounge, it's kind of off on its own. And you can go get a seat, and it's a more intimate environment for those kind of productions and shows.
And it's one of those catch-all venues, wouldn't you say, where it's like trivia, it turns into a little bit of a nighttime action in the evenings, meet and greets during the day. Like it's a little of everything happens in there.
Yeah, it's very much like a multi-purpose kind of area in a sense. They even have a dance floor. That's where they had bingo and, all those kind of things, even the solo, because they don't have a dedicated solo lounge on this class of ship. That's where everybody would meet. And during the solo meetups, they would even have they would have something going on, like a trivia game or something like that amongst the solo. So again, like you said, it was kind of like programming going on all day in that lounge. So anytime you popped in there was something going on.
How were the sea days as far as crowds and congestion?
Not too bad. Again, it's being an older ship. It's not as open of a floor plan, so things do get kind of like compartmentalized, which I think is better in a sense. So when you would walk around the ship, it never really felt too nuts in there. It was always a lot of room to walk. I never felt like I was rubbing elbows with everybody walking around. The sea days were fine. We only had 2 sea days on this ship, on the beginning and the end, but again, I really never felt like it was too overcrowded.
Does this ship have, I might be mistaken for another one, does it have like a bar district on it where there's, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 bars right there kind of together outside of a restaurant?
Not really. The bars there's like maybe 4 or 5 bars on this one. But no, they're not. It's not. I don't recall seeing that on the ship. They definitely have like a wine bar and a martini bar, things like that, but they're not necessarily connected together.
Gotcha. Okay. So when you're trying to like get food on your sea days, was that an issue at all?
No, in fact, I was anticipating that being on larger ships, and I have to say, I never felt like I waited for anything. It was always, everything was always moving. There never was an issue. Occasionally you might walk by and see a large crowd trying to go in for breakfast. Hopefully people don't take this the wrong way, but because there was an older crowd, and I was at one point in my life for the first time the younger person in the crowd going around, a lot of people seemed to eat early. So I would walk by like the main dining rooms and see a little bit of a line like right at 5 o'clock when the main dining rooms are open. But because I typically eat later, like 7 or so, I never really had any issue with finding food, even for lunch or breakfast.
Walk through the casino. How was the smoke situation in and around it?
Yeah, it's definitely older ship from that point of view. And again, I don't really utilize the casino, but the casino's kind of on this ship, kind of on I believe on the 4th or 5th level. So it's kind of down in the basement, so to speak, of the ship. So it wasn't like the newer ships where you're always walking through the casino to go from one place to another. So I would go down there to walk down there. One of the bars was down there. I would walk down there just to see what's going on. There definitely was a smell of smoke as soon as you started getting near the casino. I heard some complaints from some people who had cabins that were lower level, closer to the casino, that some of that seeped up into the cabin area, but I didn't have that problem in my cabin at all.
Okay, very good. And
they had a couple different smoking areas. One obviously being the casino. They also have like an upper deck, like bar, outdoor bar, above the pool area where smoking was permitted as well. But again, it wasn't in your face. It didn't really bother me as a non-smoker.
Gotcha. Ports of call. You leave Tampa. What was your first port, and what was the highlight for you?
First port was Cozumel. Been to Cozumel before, so I basically just hung out in the port, walked around, got some souvenirs, had a drink, and just kind of explored the port area. I didn't really plan anything because I didn't really want to overplan my vacation, so kind of just walked off the boat, hung out there, and had a good time just walking around, seeing the sights in the Cozumel area.
Were there a lot of ships in port?
I believe there were 2 other ships when we were there.
Gotcha. Which dock does NCL use there in Cozumel? Is it the ones that over by Royal Caribbean and Carnival, or down on the other end at the? I think
it's near Royal Caribbean Carnival, because I believe the other ships that were there I believe one was Star to Sea, so there was a big Royal Caribbean ship there while we were there.
Gotcha. So after Cozumel, where did you go?
Harvest Caye, which is NCL pseudo private destination in that area in Belize. Really enjoyed that port. I did plan an excursion there. I took the Monkey River cruise tour, which was really nice. I booked it through NCL. Basically, you're with maybe 20 other people in a small boat that leaves right from the dock from Harvest Caye, and it kind of quickly goes across the bay, and it goes up the Monkey River, which is the name of the river, and it's very much like a jungle cruise for real. And the captain on that small boat and his assistant, would stop and point out different trees and different flowers and things like that. But we saw monkeys, we saw, all different kinds of birds and things like that. And as they get further up the river, they kind of beach to boat, and you walk through a trail. And again, you're seeing a lot of wildlife and things like that. It was a really great excursion. I would highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. In fact, I want to go back and take my kids there, because it was a really good kind of immersive kind of experience.
How much of the NCL branding is there once the ship docks and you're right there in the complex? I've never been before. I know it's been open for almost a decade now, though. Is it totally NCL branded, or I know you can't use like your card to buy drinks and food, correct?
Yes, correct. It's not really branded. I would say that it's not like NCL in your face when you're walking around there, because my understanding is that the model that NCL worked out with the deal they worked to develop it's all independent business persons that have the shops, have the duty free, have the restaurants, the bars, and even the souvenir places. So yeah, you can't use your NCL card there. None of your ship benefits extend to the island there. But no, it's you feel like you're not at an NCL property. Like when you go to Great Star Caye or something, you definitely know it's NCL's running it. We don't have that same feeling at Harvest Caye.
And then after Harvest Caye, where did you go?
Roatan.
How was your day there?
It was good. Like I liked it a lot. I didn't really do much there. I walked around, hung out. I picked up some souvenirs for the kids. I got some lunch. There's like a restaurant there right at the port. That's really nice. I mean, Roatan's one of those places where the port is very nice and it's beautiful there. But unless you organize something, venturing out from the port area is probably not the best idea.
Yeah, no, fair enough. That's another place I haven't been to since it has been developed there in Roatan. When you're inside of the compound, we'll call it the gated area, it's right. pretty nice with the pool and the shops and the selections to grab a bite and such.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very well developed, very friendly, very, affordable, and nothing there is like too crazy expensive or anything. A lot of local business people there trying to make a living, again, but nobody's, trying to, nobody's going after you to try to buy something. It's a very, very nice environment there. You walk around. You can walk out of the port there. Again, like you said, it's kind of gated. Where you can walk through the area, and there's taxis and things like that if you want to go somewhere else. But again, I wasn't familiar enough with it to do that.
Did you have any other ports on this one?
The last one we stopped at was Costa Maya.
Mm-hmm. And what'd you think?
Same thing. I mean, you've been to Costa Maya. It's very much a port, a cruise port, in terms of development. Just to back up on Roatan, because there was other ships in at the time, we had to. At Costa Maya. Sorry, I made a mistake. At Costa Maya, we had to use tenders there because the port was full with other ships while we were there. So again, not a big deal, but there's that headache of taking a tender from the boat. And they did use the cruise ships tenders, so we went back and forth. Again, I kind of just hung out. I enjoyed my time at Costa Maya. There's a really good Mexican restaurant there. Obviously, I went and had lunch there. Walked around, just got kind of, got oriented to the area, but had a good time there as well.
Is that the Mexican restaurant that is on the second level overlooking the pool?
Yes, right there. Yeah, it's pretty good.
So good.
And they had good beer and stuff like that. So it was fun just to hang out there. So.
How was the tendering process? Like, we always joke around saying that every time NCL does a tendering operation, it's always like first day on the job for them. Was it pretty streamlined here, or was it a little chaotic? Was it chaotic at all?
I wouldn't call it chaotic. I would say like I kind of like didn't rush to get off, the ship. And so I was like, I had nothing planned. So I wasn't going to stand in line to get on the tender. It was the cruise ship's tender boat, so they're smaller, right? They're
True.
like the lifeboat, type of tenders. So, but they had a bunch of them going, and it was a pretty quick tender process, So I didn't notice it to be that bad. But again, it's frustrating. You'd rather just get off and on the ship, but but it was what it was. But it wasn't out of control or disorganized at all.
I guess the first world problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you make your way back to Tampa. How was the debark there?
Great. So just a quick preface. So I was coming back to port as the first big winter storm in the Northeast was happening. So I was not that it was a problem in Tampa, but I was concerned about getting home. So, I was kind of watching the weather and watching the airline and things like that. So we got in on time in Tampa. Very easy process. I originally had a shuttle booked through NCL to get to the airport. I wind up not using that because I couldn't go to the airport because my flights were canceled. But basically, it was real easy. Got right off. They had the facial recognition for customs and walk right out. I had a flight that was about, I think, around maybe like 1:00 in the afternoon out of Tampa into Philadelphia. And Philadelphia airport was closed by the time my flight was going to take off. So my flight got canceled pretty early. Yes, I spent another night. I wound up booking the same hotel I stayed in the night before. Originally, I was going to be stuck there for 2 nights. I made some calls and was able to finagle to get back. My ship returned on a Sunday on Monday, but I had trip insurance. I was able to get all my expenses reimbursed for the hotel and food and things like that.
So any first-time tips to offer someone who might be considering Norwegian Dawn?
I tell you what, like if you're traveling with mostly adults that don't need the water slides and all the fancy recreational type of activities, it's a perfect ship, and it was fine for me as a 50-year-old person going on a cruise. If you go in with that mindset, that's fine. But I felt like the crew was really good, the amenities were fine, the food was good. There was really nothing to complain about. The ship. Again, you can nitpick, but I think the ship was built like in 2002 or something like that. So it's, going on 25 years old. It's very well maintained, very clean. Other than if you're looking for a USB port, that I was that old. So you got to go in with an open mind, and I think you'll be fine. If you're looking for all the bells and whistles of aqua coasters and things like that, it's probably not your ship.
What was the biggest highlight of this cruise for you?
I would say the Monkey River tour I took in Harvest Caye. Great experience. Besides meeting people and things like that in terms of an activity, that was my biggest highlight.
For the price you paid for this 7-night cruise, minus the interruption at the end there, was the value there?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah, I think I got a really good deal. Obviously, I was traveling in January, so it's a little bit off season. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I got my money's worth for sure.
And your final thoughts of Norwegian Dawn? Great
ship, great crew. I'm always very pleased with Norwegian. I am not a very picky traveler, but at the same time, I couldn't find much to pick on this vacation.
We've been talking with Tony about his 7-night sailing out of Tampa on Norwegian Dawn over to the Western Caribbean. Tony, always good talking to you, my friend. Thanks so much for sharing your vacation with us.
Thanks, Doug.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,